Hello, hello, hello. This is Adrienne Bergen. This is a very special episode of The Ageless Traveler. It's taken from a presentation that I recently made on a cruise ship, the Princess Cruises, to be specific, from the Azores through Morocco, through Spain, and all the way to Southampton, England. It was part of a series that I gave to promote travel, not just for your leisure activity, but as part of your life purpose. And the crescendo was anyone can change the world. That's what you'll be hearing here. You'll also be hearing the voices of people who by themselves have done exactly that. All of these come from another podcast that I do on a monthly basis in affiliation with the United Nations. It's called On the Ground, and you'll be hearing the voices of people who have made a change all by themselves or in coalition with others. And by the way, so can you.
For those of you who haven't been here before, please know that this is the end of a mini-series. It was supposed to be a 4-part, but we ended up with 5 parts. And there's been a point to all of this. The point to all of this is that there are ways through travel that you can actually get younger, that you can maintain your health, that you could live longer, live better, and live healthier. So we went through festivals of the world to show the importance of community and getting together. We went through your passport to longevity, where we looked at real-life geroscientists and how they're studying travel and its impact on you. We took a look at different kinds of new travel trends like transformational travel, wellness travel, and we also adventured. And we learned that if you challenge yourself, if you take a risk, you're actually going to increase your cognition. But the one thing that every single geroscientist say is this: passion and longevity. The NIH, the NIA research on purpose in life shows that individuals who feel that they have a magnificent, compelling life purpose actually can add, and this is a big number, 43% lower risk of mortality. Imagine that. And I think you probably all know that. But what we're going to do today in our crescendo at the end of our mini-series is we're going to look at life purpose in a very grand way. Not just how much we love our children, our family, our grandchildren, not just our careers, not just our neighborhood, and not even just how we volunteer. But can we really change the world? So let's take a look at this for a moment. Today, you say to yourself, there's a lot of problems in the world, but what could I do about it? There's nothing I could do about it. I'm only one person. Well, I'm here to tell you that anyone, particularly one person, can change the world. So you know Margaret Mead, one of the great anthropological social theorists of the world, never believed that a few caring people can change the world, for indeed that's all that ever has. And I can tell you that you're going to be meeting today about 10 people who have changed the world. And they never would have been able to do it in a crowd. They were only able to do it by themselves. When we're finished, you will be too. Now, you may or may not realize this, but you are part of something called civil society. For some reason, it's not a phrase we use a lot. You don't hear this in the news. You don't hear it even in school. How many, I'm going to ask you, have heard the phrase civil society? One person, 2 people. Civil society is us. It's the group of folks that are not in the government, the group of folks that are not part of a mega international corporate structure. It's us. And civil society can make a change. And I love this particular definition because we're the space. We're the space between government and business where citizens can actually influence the world. And in general, that's called civil society. And I'll tell you that one of the greatest ways to be in civil society is to travel, because travel plus bringing your ideas to wherever you go, plus citizenship, means that every single act of travel can possibly change the world. I'm going to give you a quick story, a little funny story. All my life I wanted to go to Borneo. In 1954, who knows what opened in California? Disneyland. And in Brooklyn, where I was, and I was a little kid, everybody wanted to go to Disneyland. but not me. I wanted to meet Trader Sam and go to Borneo. And many, many, many years later, I got to Borneo and I was on a tour, and there were people in a longhouse, and they were all women, and they had their crafts in front of them, and nobody was buying anything. And I'll tell you why. Because you had to pay each person as you went along, and at the end, you had to get back on the bus. Those are the days. It was Tuesday, it must be Belgium. Quick travel. And I said, why don't you have one person at the end? I was thinking of a cash register, but that was not in the cards yet. Pay all at one time. Oh my goodness, this was an incredible idea to these folks. And my guide was British, and he said, how many people are here from Britain? We had a lot, a couple of times. And he said in that great British humor, we'll have to wait a moment because Adrian is organizing the boutique. And they changed it. And I got a letter saying, we've been making a lot of money here. So don't think you cannot take even your most base instincts, like my love for shopping, and bring it to wherever you go. And you too can organize the boutique. But this is a little bit more serious. This is me last August in Uganda with what we would call pygmies. But they are the Batwa. And the Batwa used to live in the impenetrable forest, but they are hunter-gatherers, and one or two of the great mountain gorillas got snared because of them. And they were actually forced out of the forest. There are 12,000 of them. But they were forced out of the forest with nothing. Just goodbye after thousands of years, about 2,000 years of living as forest people. And it was a terrible situation for them. And one guy created an incredible tourism experience with them for you. And I had the opportunity to speak to the chief. And I asked him, this has been something amazing for you. He was 72 years old last year. He was expelled from his land at age 40. And I asked him, what's happened in the last 32 years? What would you say to people? And he said, I would say it's for the children. I would say that I'm happy that I'm out. I'm resigned to it because my children and my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren will be part of the world. The only thing I don't want them to forget is who they were. And so when you take a picture, and they want you to take a picture with the Batwa, as the camera is rolling or your phone is snapping, you have to say, Batwa, 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 Batwa. And so do all the children, and so do all the tourists. Because one person, in their case, did change the world. They would have been extinct. There would be no Batwa. So how do we do this? Well, I want to talk about NGOs, non-governmental organizations. This is a term that I think more people know than civil society. Have you heard of NGOs or even belong to an NGO? Yeah. Well, these are when the people get together with a particular mission and a strategy, and they want to intervene in a problem that is part of their mission. And it is mission-driven. It is generally a nonprofit. I met here on the ship a lady who actually writes grants. That's her business. She's a grant writer for NGOs, and they have a global reach, and here's what's more important. They have a local reach. That means once you get out in the world and you see an issue, and it is in your mind that you would like to do something about it, there's probably somebody around the corner in your community, in your place of worship, in your school, in the nearby university that you can meet and get together and do something with. So here is a real person. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I am a podcaster. And my main podcast is a travel podcast. It's called the Ageless Traveler. We have a newsletter every Tuesday, but I have another podcast. And this podcast is called On the Ground. It's the podcast for the United Nations from the Global NGO Executive Committee. That means all the NGOs, we have about 2,000 of them, get together and propose what's going to be on this podcast, which we have every month. The idea is to show success. Just what we're talking about here. How one person has changed the world. And in the next 40 minutes, 30 minutes or so, you're going to hear from a lot of them. Now, some of you may or may not have read that in parts of Africa, there's still a belief in witchcraft. which sounds very exotic and maybe very interesting. But the fact is, it really is because most Africans that live in villages do not know what dementia is, do not know what Alzheimer's is or Parkinson's. And they actually believe that an older person has been possessed. And as a result, there has been a lot of problems, land grabs, no caregiving. This woman, one woman, did something about it. She was the head of a brain foundation. She's a neuroscientist. And she said, you know what? I got to get the word out. I got to get people to understand what that really is. And here you will hear from Dr. Temitope Farambi.
We set up a campaign called Dementia Not Witchcraft, and it was widely publicized. And this led to a national body, the National Senior Citizen Center in Nigeria, adopting that campaign to run across the length and breadth of Nigeria.
Her idea was very simple. She was going to go to all the radio stations in Nigeria and ask them for what's called a PSA, a public service announcement. Now, those of you who have ever heard the phrase, here's your brain on drugs, when they had the war against drugs, we always have a war in the U.S. There's a war against drugs, the war against cigarettes. All of this information comes from ad councils and free ads, PSAs, public service announcements. She had an idea. Why not do that and explain what Alzheimer's is all about? It worked. It worked throughout the nation of Nigeria, and now we're looking at it for Tanzania, Kenya, and other places that have the same types of problems. One person. But that was a person who knew exactly what their mission was. And this is a question I'm going to ask all of you. When I go and I talk to people who are in NGOs, particularly young people who are coming out of school and they have to make a decision in life, what is their mission? What are they going to do with the next 110 years of their life? I show them this little puzzle piece because it is a puzzle. There's no doubt. And I'm going to show you the same puzzle piece. Where might you fit in to change the world? And we're going to talk about charities and social entrepreneurship, advisories, coaches, philanthropists, volunteers, activists. They're all slightly different. And I'm going to explain the difference, and I'm going to ask you throughout this presentation for you to think of where you might fit in. Now, they overlap, and so do you. So you may find several places in the world that you might fit in. And my real sincere hope is that you won't stop thinking about it, that you'll think about it after you get home and wonder, where do I fit in? Because once you know, you become the possibility of being a force in the world. And you could make every trip a trip for good. How many of you already have planned your next trip? That means that you're going to have another opportunity, and pretty soon, to adapt some of these things that you're going to be thinking about now. It's really only a 4-step process to change the world, only 4 steps. So every time you say, can't do anything about it, I'm helpless, I'm alone, go through the 4 steps. And immediately, without you having done anything, something will emerge. The universe will bring to you something that you can do. But these are the 4 steps. First, what do you care about? What are you passionate about? Not what somebody else cares about, not what the newspapers say you should care about, not what you used to care about, but who you are today. Then you're going to select a partner. I'm going to show you how to do that very soon. Because although I say anyone can change the world, you're really changing the world in community. And then you can learn and explore and volunteer and do this through voluntourism, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then the 4th part. This is the part that I obviously like the best. And I'm going to teach you how to do it. How to spread your story in a way that people will listen. So those are the 4 steps, and we'll look at all of them through the eyes of people who have done it. But for the moment, I would like you to look at it internally. So we've been taking a big external voyage on the sea in Spain, hopefully at least in our mind, in Morocco. But this is an internal voyage. Close your eyes for just a half a second. What do you really love to do? I know somebody who changed the world through crocheting by going to Malawi and teaching girls who had no education how to crochet. and create a business for them. It was an amazing thing to see. So when she closed her eyes, she didn't say, I want to change the world. I want world peace. That's what I'm going to do, world peace. She said, no, I just like to crochet. So what do you really love to do? How can it help others? And what is stopping you from doing it? I'm really here for number 3, to break through so nothing is stopping you from doing it. But the first 2 questions you have to answer. What do you really love to do, and how could it help others? And I'm going to ask a couple of people. How many people love to read? And they even have book clubs, right? You know that you can read for the blind. You know that. That's just a small step in changing the world. Anybody else have a hobby? Do we have any fishermen here? We're going to be talking from one of the biggest philanthropists in the world about fishing in a moment or 2. We have a fisherman. Art, fantastic. Art therapy, art for children. For 5 years, I was a grief facilitator for children who lost their parents early in life, as happened to me. It was a wonderful thing. It's called Good Grief. And it's a really important charity. It changes the way children grow after they've had such a tragedy. All of it is through art. All of it. Every Thursday, art is done, and they talk to each other, and they will tell you from age 2 to 22 that they've never had such an experience in their life. They went from depression to being the most outspoken, active students in their class because of art. One small changes the world. So what about actually going out and volunteering? Well, I'm going to introduce you to Lorraine Keenan. She is, anybody from Ireland or Irish? Because you're going to love this accent. I won't even keep it from you.
I'm Irish. I was born in Dublin, Ireland, a long time ago. And I'm a true believer in having fun and hard work, and play hard, work hard is my motto in life. And with that in mind, that's why I called it Hero Holidays, because yes, they are going to do some good and some work, but they're going to have a great time doing it. And that's very important.
I read just the other day that the number 1 growing trend among folks over the age of 55 is taking a gap year. People are taking a gap year from retirement. They're too busy in retirement. They need a gap year. And what are they doing? They're volunteering all over the world. Heroes Holidays is just one particular case that I ran across. It was wonderful. And all of these voices you're hearing come from On the Ground. On the Ground is the podcast of which I host for the United Nations. And these are all organizations started by one person, and they change the world. Now, how many at home volunteers somewhere? I don't care if you're bringing soup, during the holidays, or you're working in for children or older adults. Well, volunteering is a wonderful way to change the world, but it's the attitude of the volunteer. So this year, talk about travel, the Arizona airport won as best airport in the United States. Why did it win? It won because of their volunteer program. Now, listen to this volunteer, because he's very extraordinary, but he's like everyone out there at Arizona Airport.
Many stories have been very impactful on me. There was a woman walking through the airport. I said, "Do you know where you're going?" And she said, "Travel-wise or in life?" So I said, "So what's going on?" She said, "My husband passed 3 weeks ago, and I'm getting all these texts from my late husband's friends saying, how could I go to Cabo 3 weeks after my husband passed?" And from personal experience of loss, I said to her, no one has the right to tell you how to grieve. You've just got to say, you know what, I'm going to go away. I'm going to laugh. I'm going to cry. I'm going to get in touch with myself. So that put a smile on her face. I waved goodbye as they boarded the plane, and then turned around and continued my rounds around the airport.
Now, what are his rounds around the airport? If somebody is lost, he tells them how to get to their gate. That's what he does as a volunteer. it's the way he does it, so that he's actually changing the lives because he's watching and looking. So even if you're a volunteer, some people complain to me a lot, by the way, that their volunteer experience is not good. They're stuck in the back with envelopes, and they used to be a professor, or they had a magnificent skill and it's not being used. And the volunteer experience isn't giving them back that feeling of passion and power that can make them 43% less risk of mortality. And I asked them, how do you approach it? Because you could take any situation you're in and make it bigger than it is because you're bigger than it is. So I want to go through 3 things quickly today. This one is number 1, and it's probably the most important. Remember, I promised you that I would show you how you can get other people involved in your mission? Well, it's very quick. There is a book, and if you can get it, it's on Amazon. It's called Positive Deviance. Now, you may not like the word because deviant usually means being different and sometimes being bad. But positive deviance means that you're different from everybody else in a good way. And you are all positive deviants because you would be downstairs having a snack or a Prosecco or your last packaged drink. But no, you're here. And the only thing you knew about being here is that it was about changing the world. That makes you a positive deviant. So look around, and now you know what positive deviance looks like. In Vietnam, during the war, there were children starving in many small villages. And 2 people, the Sternums, were sent by the United Nations to fix the problem. But there was one little problem about all these children dying of starvation. They had no budget at all. They went down there to see what was going on and how much food would be necessary to bring with no money. Something happened to them. It was like a light bulb. They noticed that there were some children who were not starving. In fact, they were flourishing. They were very, very filled with the kind of nutrition you needed to thrive. So they looked at those children and the mothers, and they called these mothers the positive deviants because they were doing something good that deviated from what everybody else did. What the other mothers were doing was whatever food they had, they were feeding the children once a day. The second thing they were doing is there was little fish, little shrimp in the water that they wouldn't feed the children because it was considered to be low class, and that was a belief, a cultural belief. These mothers were going out and getting the shrimp, and they were feeding the children throughout the day, and these children were thriving. So they got these positive deviant mothers together. They went from community to community, and in fact, all of the children lived well. All of the children changed. They were the positive deviants, and they brought the information to the people who didn't know or understand. That became an institute at Tufts University in the United States, which is called the Institute of Positive Deviance, and this has now changed the world in so many ways. Circumcisions of girls in Pakistan have stopped because of the fathers who didn't believe in it, those positive deviants. If you ever go to a hospital, and I hope you don't, you're going to see something. Notice this. The place where nurses and doctors wash their hands is in front of you. Used to be behind you. And MRSA, which is infections you get when healthcare professionals don't wash their hands, was skyrocketing all over the United States in hospitals. You've heard of MRSA, and you've heard of that issue. What did they find? Well, there was no MRSA in hospitals where the patients could see whether or not the doctors and the nurses were washing their hands. And because they could be observed, they changed their behavior. You could go through about 100 different places where positive deviance makes a difference. So, what do you want to do?
Shift from being an expert at being a non-expert, from being a teacher to being a student. I would say that actually to describe this process, when people say, who are you? I'm an expert at being a non-expert because the solution is within the people I reach, the people I work with.
So she's French, could you tell? And I will tell you that when you are looking for people to work with you, Most people say to me, I don't know anybody. I'm nobody, and everybody else I know is nobody. Or like Emily Dickinson, I'm nobody, you nobody too. The fact is, you don't want somebody. You want the person with the need. The person with the need who has cracked the code. That's the person you want. You want to fix homelessness? Find somebody who is homeless and isn't anymore. That's the person you want on your team. You don't have to know the president, the CEO, or even the rich person. You have to know somebody who solved the problem and work with them. That's who you want on your team. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, this is great, Adrienne. I'm going to do all these things, but I really wish I could make some money out of it. Wouldn't it be nice? Now, of course, social entrepreneurship, you can now study in school. You can go to universities, and maybe some of you have kids or grandkids that are going to become social entrepreneurs. Here's a real social entrepreneur who a few years ago decided that aging was going to be a thing, and people didn't know much about aging, and wouldn't it be nice to have a paid-for website where people who were studying aging could actually make some money?
2015 or 16, I thought, this movement to raise awareness of ageism is new. So with two colleagues, and of course, it took a lot longer than we thought, we created the Old School Anti-Ageism Clearinghouse. The website is oldschool.info. And you can find it is the place to go to educate yourself about ageism from all different perspectives.
Now, you might be an advisor. How many people were teachers or are teachers here in the room? How many people were coaches or advisors within an organization or with your own practice, your own business? We recently had the privilege in December of going through the South Pacific Islands, starting in Tahiti and ending up in Melbourne. It's one of the great travel trips of the world. And one of those places that we stayed at was Tonga. And I was able to meet this young lady who runs what is basically an eco-center in Tonga entirely on her own. And it's about 80 acres of exotic plants that now people are coming from all over the world to study for healing. But she has become the advisor and simply because she inherited with her husband this plot of land. And they created an ecosystem that now is being studied everywhere. Now, I do want to talk about activism for a minute, and I will play this because it's very moving and it goes to show you. When you look into yourself and you answer that first question, what do I love and who would it help? A little hint or tip or prompt is, what would you have needed? What would have helped you? Which is why good grief is something I was so devoted to, because I'm one of those people who lost parents early in life. So ask yourself that question. And this gentleman who is a lawyer, he asked himself that question and literally has changed the world. I'll tell you the result of what he did.
My personal story, I was a cancer survivor. I was a young guy at 48. I had colon cancer. As I regained my health, I was willing to do things that were a little different from just my practice of law. Others reached out to me and said, Bernie, we're starting the International Society for Stem Cell Research. When I went to the meeting, Adrienne, there were 600 scientists, but I was like the only patient. So they tapped me. I became the de facto lawyer of the field, created a nonprofit organization called the Genetics Policy Institute. The most prominent scientists in the field essentially backed me.
Yeah, and what happened was Steve Reeves got involved and people who had spinal cord issues got involved. And today we have something called stem cell research, which was going to be banned, by the way, by many countries and also in a treaty by the United Nations. And so that is the kind of thing that happens when you're passionate about it because it affected you in the first place. Now, I said that I was going to show you how to surround yourself with the right people, and now you know who the right people are. But I was also going to then show you the number 4 on our list. The number 1 is what are you passionate about? But number 4 on the list is spreading the word. How do you tell your story? And it takes only 2 days to teach this. I'm going to do it in 2.5 minutes. But I will also tell you that on the Ageless Traveler website, there's a course that you can actually take. It is on demand, it's on the computer, and it's called Speak Out Communication. And it actually does help you in 6 easy lessons with a workbook online how to tell your story if you want to change the world. The U-curve method is the way every single successful advocate tells their story about their mission. They say where they are today, the challenge or the pain point that they or another community has felt, right? What happened, the new reality after they did something that worked, their turning point that helped them show others how to do it, how they climbed out and the people that helped climbed out of the story that was the negative story, what they're doing now that's different than it was before, and a happy ending. That's called the U-curve story. And you could use it over and over and over again for any mission. So I'm going to show you a U-curve story. I'm going to tell you one about something I'm really doing now. The April 8th, there's going to be a meeting, and that meeting is to rehearse a webinar on witchcraft in Africa that's being used to incarcerate older people and grab their land. That's where we are now, and it will be in the first real breakthrough to this killings. There were 3 lynchings actually a couple of weeks ago by pretending somebody is possessed and taking their land. It's a terrible international crisis, not much heard. My first pain point came in Lisbon when I went into a cathedral as a tourist and I saw them raising money for this. This was years and years ago. And it always stayed on my mind that I wanted to solve this terrible problem because some of these older people were taking care of children. And those children were being incarcerated and sometimes stoned with them. I never forgot that problem, but what could I do? I was only one person. And then a new reality came into my life. I started to join these NGOs, and I began to understand that there was power out there. And I had a turning point when they asked me to be a host of a show. And I said yes right away, thinking, oh, now I'm going to be able to fix this. Gee, I'm part of the UN. Well, the fact is nobody wanted to touch it. Nobody wanted to deal with it. It was denied. And then one day, a guy named Michael Kamumu from Kenya got on one of my committees. He just turned up. And I said, Michael, have you ever heard of this thing called witchcraft and they're grabbing land from older people? He said, yeah, I work on it every day. It came into my life because I was there for it to come into my life. And the next thing that happened was we had a meeting with 5 people in Kenya where this is really happening, but we brought in the tourist board. Because they want you there. They don't want this story to be real, and they don't want this story to be out. They want to fix it. And that altered everything. Once there was somebody on the ground that had a pocketbook interest in stopping what is really a criminal activity, we have what is potentially a really happy ending because we are looking at new laws, not just in criminal laws, but why this really happens. It really happens because people who are older own a lot of land, they're doing nothing with it, and their families are in poverty. Here in the U.S. and in Canada, there are civil laws that allow people to live in their home and lease it and even sell it before their demise. So money is coming to the family, everybody's happy, the older person stays in their home, and it's all real estate law. We bring a whole new dimension to this issue. That's a U-curve story. It starts with a problem and ends with a happy ending, and it's your journey throughout. So if you ever want to tell a really good story, think about this U-curve. There was a great man, passed away. His name is Milton Gralla. And he took $20,000 and ended up selling his company to a British company, by the way, for $55 million. And he wanted to write a book, How Good Guys Grow Rich, and we did it together. And this is what he taught me to do. He taught me to have a journal and to keep that journal every day. It's a very simple journal. not what you'd expect. The journal has to say, what could I have done today that would help somebody else that I didn't do? Not what did I do, not, complimenting myself, but what did I miss today? And then the next day you go back and you fix it. And if you can't fix that directly, you fix something else. Did I forget to give somebody 50 cents or €1 that asked me for the money? That's a simple one. Did I turn away because I didn't want to see their pain and I didn't want to share it? Did I not give a tip, or did I not give a compliment that I could have given to somebody here on the ship? And by the way, he would write that. He would actually write, I didn't say thank you to a waitress. I saw it on his journal once. And then he'd go back and he'd say it, thank you. Hopefully to the same person, but sometimes to someone else. And he lived that kind of life. And you will see his name all over the world on hospitals. So, he said, if you really want to live a great life, journal about what you missed and then do something every day that you do badly. If you do something badly every day, you'll improve. Those are his 2 ways of making a difference. Now, as we get to the end of this, near to the end, some of you might say, you know what? I think I'd just like to write a check. Leave me alone. I have enough problems. I'm very busy, and I want to save the world. I'll write a check. That's not a problem. If you can write a check, that's great. And I've had the privilege of meeting many philanthropists. But true philanthropist does not write a check. A true philanthropist writes a check with a purpose. How many of you have heard of 23andMe, where you can get like a DNA? So Esther Dyson, she has nothing to do with the Dyson vacuum cleaners. She is one of the greatest philanthropists living today, and also one of the greatest female investors. And already that's misogynistic, because there's plenty of female investors that are making millions, but she's one of them. She's got an instinct. One of those things that she invested in was 23andMe, just one. There are many things she's doing. So let me show you how she writes a check. She's going to tell you exactly how she writes a check.
So our mission is to help the community build their own organizations and make them more sustainable, more long-term thinking. It's kind of like we're not sending them fish. We're not even teaching them to fish. We're really helping them to build their own fishing schools so that they can create and train the next generation of people to help build a community where there's a support system, there's a strong social fabric. Our message, in a sense, is you can do this. You just need to start thinking long term. So in essence, we're coaches. It's like the football team. The team wins. The team owns the ball. They thank the coach, but the coach doesn't own the game, and the team does.
So what is she doing? She has something called the wellness movement. We talked about wellness in another presentation in terms of travel. She's gone to the 5 poorest communities in the United States. And she has given them the education to re-educate others about exercise, about good food, about nutrition, about stress relief, about longevity, about aging, about all the things that you and I have talked about in this mini-series. And very much like Monique Sternin, Positive Deviance, she's not the expert on the stage. She doesn't even, as they both said, teach people to fish. She teaches people to learn to fish by themselves. So when you give a check and when you're thinking about changing the world through your own largesse, when that is what you're doing, think beyond the check. What are they doing with it? Who are you helping? And are you really creating something that will perpetuate your legacy? You can ask me anything, but don't tell anybody else out of this room. I was a lawyer. Do not hold that against me. I was a lawyer for 35 years in the field of trust and estates, and I saw a lot of checks being written. And I also saw people like Milton Gralla, who I mentioned a moment ago, who journaled, creating something that you all know about, and that's called matching funds. Have you ever heard of matching funds? If you give a certain amount of money, somebody will match it. Where did that idea come? It came from Milton Gralla and his group. And I will tell you that I have seen money go down south so fast that you couldn't get there to catch it because only a check was written. The person did not give a moment of their time. So I suggest if that's the way you want to change the world, you need the same life purpose, the same who could it help, the same why I wanted to help as you would if you were giving your time. We're going to end here with a charity. Now, at one of my presentations that had to do with festivals, I told you about a festival coming up pretty soon in the town of Weimar, in Germany, where they actually, for the 12th or 13th year in a row, are able to bring German students, Israeli students, and Palestinian students together so that they could talk with each other. I also told you about Good Grief, where they bring children who've lost parents. I can't speak to anybody else about this because it stigmatizes you. Well, trust me, it stigmatizes you. They can't talk to anybody else about it. Together so they could talk. You even heard, how many were here earlier and you heard the culinary presentation from the top chef? What did he say? There are 60 nationalities on this boat. 60. I wish that people, these are his words, in the world could talk to each other the way we can, right? He said that about this boat. So here is a charity, and here's one person. And you can see Elizabeth is a really young person who started it all by herself.
A holistic space for kids to have conversations that could be very painful, particularly in the Belonging Project, right? For kids who don't feel like they will, to be able to sit down together and find points of contact that are meaningful and resonant for all, and to really listen to each other sensitively. It has to be in relatively small groups so that everybody has a real, genuine opportunity to be heard and also to listen so that everybody can participate and feel like they're part of something larger than themselves.
And I asked Elizabeth, how did she come up with the idea that simply creating what she calls the Belonging Project for teenagers that can't find themselves so they can speak to each other? And she said, I looked at other groups like Good Grief. I looked at other groups where people were talking to each other. She looked at the positive deviance, and she asked the people who were heading those organizations to support her, help her, and train her. So it goes full circle, and it really works. But as Mother Teresa would say, if you can't feed 100 people, feed just one. That means you can start today. Now, this is going to be silly. This is going to sound silly to you, but I'm perfectly serious about this. You know, here they always ask you to fill out a survey all the time. Have you heard that like 18 times? And if you like somebody, look at their badge and say something nice. Every person in this room thought to themselves, I'm going to say something nice about X. How many people will? Maybe 10%? You got their hands up? Why? Because you're people of good intentions, and intentions fade. Action does not. Change in the world is like a muscle. The more you do it, even if it's a small exercise, the more it comes to you naturally, the more you take for granted that you're feeding one person at a time or 100. Plus, and here is the hardest part, we could spend hours on it, but I'm going to see if we can do it one way in a moment. You don't know what you're creating. This is the hardest part. When you put something good out in the world, you don't know where it's going to lead. I was actually on another cruise very recently, and the cruise director became a cruise director because 3 people said something nice about her. You know what she was doing before? She was the bingo lady. They liked her bingo presentation so much that 3 people, that's it all took. When my son was working as an aide to a congresswoman in Washington, I asked him, when she gets letters, is it really impactful? Oh, he said, yeah, it makes a huge difference on what people in Congress think when their constituents write to them. And I said, how many letters do they have to get to make a difference? Are you ready for this? 6. 6 people say something to a congressman and they're all the same thing and they pay attention. You have no idea how the smallest thing that you do can have an effect. It's called the butterfly effect in science, where a butterfly moves its wings one part of the world and it's felt in another part of the world. But the butterfly doesn't know it. So I wanted to end this with a song. I thought it'd be a nice rally. But of course, I couldn't figure out any relationship between any song I could think of. And then all of a sudden, it came to me because I was reading something on the internet. And this is maybe a surprise. Maybe you don't know this story, and we'll end with an actual song. There was a young lady who was in 2013 who wanted to do a documentary. She wanted to do a documentary about a particular song. And when she started to do the documentary, they asked her for $1,500 to buy the rights to use this song, and she paid it. And as she was researching for her documentary, she realized that the song should be in the public domain. There shouldn't be any money paid. But this big company, Warner Music, one of the biggest companies in the world, said no, they own the copyright. She sued them, and she won. And they had to pay back in royalties $14 million because of their wrongful use of a copyright. They said, well, if you were an individual or a family, you could sing the song. But if you were doing it on a stage or for business, you had to pay them $5,000. She actually got a discount from them originally. But she won. One person brought this suit. They had a battery of lawyers. Her parents told her not to bring the suit because she would be bombarded by legal fees. And it would be a terrible thing, and she'd lose anyway, and she won. As a result, we can sing that song, here's the butterfly effect, on this stage together without paying any money. Otherwise, it would have cost $5,000, and we would not be able to sing the song. Here is the song. If you don't know the words to this song, I wrote it on the side. We ready to go out singing? Here's the song that is now in the public domain. Happy birthday to you. Let's hear it. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you. One person can change the world. And now we can all sing happy birthday and not pay any money for it. So this is what happens when you have the nerve, the guts, the passion, the will, and the people around you. Then anybody could change the world.